Why are the pro-Israel and pro-Palestine protests in Western countries so big and loud? See here. Tens of thousands rally around the world in support of Israel and Palestinians. Street marchers back both Israel and the Palestinians in European cities. High risk of violence at protests over Israel and the Palestinians. Australia intelligence chief warns of potential for violence at home as Middle East tensions rise. And in some cases, it's not just big loud protests, but violent bloodlust. Horror incident as mystery figures drive around Melbourne and shout sickening slur about hunting Jews. Biden condemns horrific act of hate after 6-year-old Palestinian American is stabbed to death in Illinois. I can understand that Palestinians are angry at their severe mistreatment by Israel. Also, I can understand that the targeted killings of civilians by Hamas is appalling. The protests I've seen regarding the Russian invasion of Ukraine, over 200,000 deaths. The Yemeni civil war, over 350,000 deaths. The Syrian civil war, over 600,000 deaths, or any other geopolitical event are dwarfed by the protests regarding the current Hamas-Israel war, over 5,000 deaths as of 16 October 2023. Neither Israel nor Hamas can be called the good guy here. But what makes people support one side or the other so deeply? After all, only a small fraction of pro-Palestinian protesters are of Palestinian heritage. And I wouldn't be surprised if a large fraction of pro-Israel protesters don't have Israeli heritage. So what makes these protests so big and loud? Western governments are key players in the conflict, and this conflict has been going on for so long that the outrage institutions are well developed and easy to mobilize. I honestly don't know. Michigan has a pretty substantial Arab and Muslim population, and it's been quiet here. Because a lot of people remember that protests are a means of achieving political change, not an exercise in preaching to the choir to feel good about yourself. If the political establishment of your country is showing ironclad support for Ukraine, a pro-Ukraine Westerner has nothing to protest. Western protests aren't going to convince Putin to calm down. They target Western leaders. Israel receives a lot of support from Western governments, and there is not a consensus on the conflict in the general population. Convincing leaders to do what you want isn't a sure thing, and the relevant leaders have relevant powers. Orlando has more than 30,000 Muslims, and it's very quiet here. Also a high amount of Jews. Same in PBCO. No issues here. Because people seem to base their identity around it a lot. I know plenty of people who couldn't give a shit about things like Libya, the Arab Spring. But when something happens between Israel and Palestine, out come the Facebook posts and platitudes. Because, partially, they take place in the context of thousand-years-old interfaith clash historical inertia. Western governments are aiding and abetting an open and enthusiastic genocide. I don't think it needs explaining why people are outraged by that. Depends on the country. Here in Ireland you regularly see pro-Palestine demonstrations and marches. I am 28 and I remember seeing such rallies in my home city in Ireland as a child of probably the same large size. Wannabe activists. Doesn't really matter what the cause is. People want to be activists. They want to be seen as activists. The louder you scream and the more passionate you get, the more you stand out. The more you get to show others how great of a person you are. For the vast majority, it's not about the cause but the protest. My best friend is Muslim. The other is Jewish, so we talk a lot about this. There are many Muslims in my country that are interested. My country is partly responsible to some of the mess in the Middle East and still has ties with Both sides. We have had a terrorist attack since last Saturday. And there was one in Brussels just this evening. All of this ripples into our political life. People here go big and loud to the grocery store and soccer practice. Same goes for protest. The USA has been taking in thousands of immigrants from failed states all over the world. The USA even finds ways of integrating those who come to the USA illegally. I'm surprised the Palestinians haven't emigrated to the many Islamic countries in the Middle East, like Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. Many Armenians fled from the Turkish genocide and made a better life for themselves in the USA. I'm sure the Islamic world would love to have the Palestinians make a new home for themselves in their countries, bringing all their talents and unique qualities with them. Israel-Palestine is a long and well-understood conflict in the U.S., particularly in the West. Other conflicts don't have that same consideration. The correct answer is that both cultures are very powerful and very little open to any kind of compromise. Islam is worse though, and a prime ban material though. In my experience, the pro-Palestinian protests are significantly larger than the pro-Israel ones. Also completely different demographics. The Palestinian ones are largely Arabs with some leftist blacks and whites in the mix, but most of them at the protest are teenagers, early 40s. At the pro-Israel ones, it's really no POC, and it's families and elderly people. Here's a simple answer. Western countries were literally built by immigrants. So those of Jewish descent or Palestinian descent are of course going to feel passionate about it. But then, there's also just people who care about the world, other people in it. You might not think Israel are the good guy, but it is clear by their actions that Hamas are the bad guys. The intentional, targeted killing of children makes that clear. Because America has been directly involved for nearly a century in the far right of both Israel and the IS are deeply intertwined. America's role as world hegemon, the tens of billions of dollars in military aid, as well as Israel's unique history as a center of three world religions, means that this conflict has always had global consequences. Neither Israel nor Hamas can be called the good guy here. But what makes people support one side or the other so deeply? Hamas slaughtered hundreds of people. The elderly. Kids at a music festival. Infants. They kidnapped hundreds more. There's the nuance of both Israel and Palestine have done wrong in this conflict, and there's the kind of sheer evil in which a group murders in cold blood people going about their business. That is why what has happened over the last 10 days is drawing more attention than the usual cycle of Hamas lobbing missiles into Israel and Israel dropping a bomb on the building the missiles came from. There is much more anti-Semitism out there than many Americans realize. During World War II, the Arab world was aligned with Germany as regards the Jews. This was before Israel was a state. The Palestinians have been screwed by their own hatred of the Jews and especially Israel. In their eyes, Israel has no right to exist. Hamas just demonstrated what the majority of Palestinians want. Teach your children to hate so much they will strap a bomb to themselves to murder others. If you do this, you have already lost the war. Seeing another post with another random question. But the same neither Israel nor Hamas can be called good guy remark. Sigh. Your propaganda is subtle, but it's still propaganda. When terroristic organization attacked developed democratic nation and killed kids and women, the terrorists are the bad guys and the developed democratic nation are the good guys. Yup. That's simple. You are welcome. Palestinians have been living in an open-air prison for a long time. People are finally waking up to how bad it truly is and how oppressive Zionist right nationalists really are.